The air conditioning's not on, Winnie. Winnie's trying to lay on the air conditioning vent because that's how our thick girl cools down in these warm summer months. But the air conditioning, it's going to click on any second now. Don't you worry, it just clicked off. It's hot outside. I'm really surprised that both the dogs have been sunbathing earlier this morning. Speaking of, hi Cheese. Let's get into this before I get completely off topic. Hi kids, I'm Mrs. Pizza. This is Weenie, and that is Cheese. And today we are here to do a recent reads. Why? Because if I wait too long, it's too many books. It's overwhelming, so I like to do this while it's a little bit short. First off, I don't know if you can see, but this eye is incredibly red and I don't know what's happening. I just got back from being out of town and I have the airplane crud. You know when you're not really sick, but after you've been on an airplane, you just kind of feel a little congested? That's happening. So if you can hear that in my voice, you're welcome. Honestly, it's probably quite villainous, quite sexy, quite loungy. I just imagine I just like smoking a cigarette out of a cigarette holder and having a very raspy voice. Or maybe my voice sounds the same and I'm slightly unhinged. We are here to talk about some books, so let's do it, you know? Let's get into it. The first book we are going to talk about, I talked about at length in a vlog, and I will link that. I think it pops up over there on the screen. I'll link it in the description too, if you're interested in hearing me talk at length about Misery by Stephen King. I am on the very beginning, the early stages of my Stephen King journey, but I'm loving the ride. You know, every stop I've gotten off on this train has been a blast. This was the last of the Stephen King books, aside from two very hefty, intimidating books that everybody kind of touts as their favorites. This is Misery. And if you haven't heard about it, I don't know what to say to you. I'm really just impressed, honestly, if you know nothing about Stephen King and you're first learning about it here. I'm excited for me to get to talk about it. This is the story of an author. His name is Paul, and he has gotten really famous for they're kind of like historical fiction-ish novels, historical romancy almost a little bit, involving a character named Misery. Paul has recently finished his Misery novels and has now started a new author journey, starting with new novels, and he has finished his most recent novel when he's driving down a road during a snowstorm and gets into a car crash. He is rescued from freezing to death in this car accident by Annie Wilkes, who takes him home, nurses him back to health, and then is just absolutely unhinged and terrifying. Annie Wilkes is Paul's #1 fan, and she's scary. She's just very scary. This has the least amount of supernatural going on in it. It's kind of more straightforward thriller. We have a man who is stuck in a situation with his #1 fan who is absolutely unhinged and terrifying. There you go. That's Misery. There's a lot I could expound upon, and I did already in my vlog. The next book we're going to talk about, Leatherandlark by Brynne Weaver. This is the second book in the Ruinous Love trilogy. This is a series following 3 brothers. Each book kind of centers one of the brothers. The first book being Butcher and Blackbird, and this is the story of 2 serial killers falling in love. It's a dark rom-com, and I had a really good time with it. It's funny, it's steamy, and it's dark. My one thing that I keep saying when I talk about these books is, unlike most dark romances, the dark things that are happening in this book are happening around the 2 main characters. They are doing these things to other people, but not necessarily to each other. The dark things that are happening are not happening in the relationship that these 2 characters are having, and I enjoy that a lot because I feel like in a lot of dark romances, they're doing the dark things to each other, and I don't necessarily usually enjoy that, whereas in this one, we're getting some really good laughs and some really dark things happening that make you question your own sanity, that you're enjoying the time that you're having. But all that to talk about Leatherandlark, which is the second book. We are following Lachlan, who is the brother of the main male love interest in the first book. And he is kind of the fixer, cleaner, upper, #1 right-hand man, the right hand of the king type character to this like unhinged kind of psychotic crime boss that when all 3 brothers were very young helped them. And so now Lachlan is kind of indebted to this unhinged crime boss type character. And so he has to do a lot of unhinged crime boss cleaning and killing. And in the beginning of this book, he meets Lark, who is the best friend of our female main character in the first book. She is a musician and an artist of many talents, and she has a dark side to her as well, but one that's like covered in gold glitter. It was a lot of fun. These 2 characters meet. They have a horrible, horrible first meeting. And then they meet again, not realizing that they've met before. But as soon as they realize they've met before, instant enemies, absolutely hate each other. You're the worst, and we do not get along. But because they have two people close to them that are now in love and getting married, they are pushed together quite a bit. And so they are enemies that have to see each other quite often. When something is brought to Lark's attention that puts a lot of people she loves at risk, she ends up having to enter into a marriage with Lachlan. These two people that hate each other have to pretend to be in love to save everybody they care about. And in being their authentic, I hate you so I don't have to impress you selves, they end up starting to have feelings for each other in a really sweet way, because they've only ever been their authentic selves. And so they know that they're really having feelings, or the person is having feelings for the true them. This is, again, a dark rom-com. Both characters are doing dark things outside of the relationship with each other. But as far as enemies go, they really just don't like each other, but they're not necessarily doing horrible things to each other. Just your normal, I hate you kind of stuff. This one was a lot of fun. I had a good time. We now have the third one expected, or projected, I should say, to come out next year following the third and final brother in this story. I really have a good time with this. The trigger warnings for these they really make you consider not reading the book, and then you read it. And the fact that I can say things like accidental cannibalism isn't that bad in the book. I keep saying it on the internet. I should stop saying it on the internet. I enjoy a good dark rom-com. How about that? The next book I picked up after that was The Watchers by A.M. Shine. I 110% picked this up because of the movie that was coming out. It's a shorter book, and I had heard of this author before. I don't necessarily know if it was this book that I had been told about, but I picked it up as audio from the library, and it was fine. It was really mid. It was fine, is how I'll put it. I feel like I was on a streak of books after this that were just kind of fine. I didn't hate it, but I didn't love it. This is the story of Mina. She lives in Ireland, and she is kind of a struggling artist, but she also is just kind of struggling with herself. She's listless, has a strained relationship with her sister, who is the only family she has left. She is solitary and a little bit lonely, and she is given an opportunity to make some quick cash by delivering this bird to someone that has purchased it for someone. So she's going to take this bird to its new owner, and she travels through this very secluded wood area and gets trapped there, where she finds a bunker type building where 3 other people already are, and she ends up getting wrapped up in this we all stay in the bunker survival situation because something lives in these woods and it is violent. So you have this dynamic of these people being trapped in this bunker. Some of them have been there longer than others. They're all trying to survive. Mina is trying to figure out what is going on. I personally felt like the twist to this, the reveal of what is going on, maybe it happened too early, or maybe I figured it out too early. It was very okay, is this what we're getting? I thought it was fine. This is definitely more of a folk horror, monster horror, and I was interested to see the movie version of this, because I thought, because of a lot of the scary elements to this being very visual in nature, a lot of it being creeping things happening, the scary things being very visual things that are described, I thought this would lend itself well to a movie. But I've seen a lot of mixed reviews saying that the movie is just also kind of mid, also kind of average, not that great, and that certain things were changed as well in the movie that were the things that worked the best in the book. Apparently, Cheese has seen something that she does not agree with. It was fine. I don't think I've given up on this author. I just think that this book was just fine, and it sounds like the movie was just fine, and so it's nothing that I'm incredibly excited to share with people. The next book I picked up after that was The Ministry of Time, and this is by Kaliane Bradley. This is a book that I was kind of seeing everywhere for a while, and people were heaping praise upon it. I believe it was a Good Morning America book club pick. It was some kind of major book club pick. I have had a very hit and miss relationship with hold on. Winnie is losing her mind in the backyard. Well, just as I assumed, it was nothing. Oh. Well, there's some big fluffy dogs. Was it those big fluffy dogs? Because you were barking in the wrong direction. All right, The Ministry of Time. This is the story of a civil servant, a government employee who is brought onto this project where they are basically, there is a new ministry. This is taking place in Britain, I believe, but there is a new ministry that is involved with time travel. And the way that time travel works in this world is that they have figured out a way to pluck people from time and bring them to the present. And so they have done this, but they choose people that they know are going to die or would have died soon. So they're not creating ripples throughout history. These people, thank you for moving the camera. These people were done with the life they were living, and so removing them from the past and bringing them to the present won't change the past, is how they look at it. So we have a group of people that have all been plucked from different moments in the past and brought to the present, then have these people, like our main character, who are government employees, basically tasked with babysitting these people and helping them integrate themselves into the modern world. So the main character of our story is paired up with I believe he was a captain, but he was on some sort of Arctic expedition, and he lived in Victorian times, maybe, in London. And so now he is here in present day, and these two live together in a house. And this said that it was going to be part workplace drama, part romance, part sci-fi, time travel stuff. It had a lot of potential. It meandered, and I made it to the 69% mark before I DNF'd it. There was no chemistry, and I mean that in saying there was no chemistry between the characters. There was no chemistry between the characters and their kind of thriller mystery plot that was happening. Nothing felt like it had chemistry. Nothing felt like it had a good grip on the storyline. We were kind of just meandering through all of these different lines, whether it was the different side characters and what they were doing, whether it was our two main characters. I just didn't feel like there was any chemistry. The point of view of our male character, who is from the past, all of his point of views for the majority of the story that I was reading were from the past. And so we get no insight into what he's feeling or dealing with now until he verbally says it to the female main character, which is our current day timeline. I felt like she, as a character, although we were told a lot of things about her, I don't feel like her personality felt like just nothing was really working for me, which is absolutely fine. Not everybody is going to like every book. And I have since gone back and read that a lot of people felt like the last 20% of the book was a lot of dump, a lot of emotional dump, a lot of heartbreak. A lot of the plot takes place in the last 20% of the book. And I couldn't get there. I was at 69% and I was just unbelievably bored. And then there was like a sex scene that happened. And then our main character picked a fight immediately after the sex scene for absolutely no reason. And I was done. I was already kind of annoyed with her and the choices she was making and how oblivious she was being to things. And then she picked a fight after. I don't think I liked her very much. And I was tired of waiting for the chemistry to happen in any sense. I was bored. This was boring to me. The next book I picked up after that was A Shadow in the Reaping, and this is by Brynneweaver, who it's the same author that wrote the Ronas Love trilogy. Because I like that, the two books I've read in that trilogy so far, I was looking for that romance with a sense of humor, and A Shadow in the Reaping is part of I believe it's a trilogy, if not a duology. It's like a paranormal fantasy romance that this author had wrote previously. It was available on Kindle Unlimited. I was like, hey, I've liked things this author has written. I like her sense of humor. Let's go for it. I ended up not really liking this one as much. You could see the seeds of what will become where she is currently writing, but she wasn't quite there yet. This was kind of all over the place. And I wasn't a big fan. This is the story of Lou, and she is a vampire. And in this world, the vampire lore is a little bit different. She is kind of an ancient type vampire, what is called a siren. She has the ability to sing, and then people will do kind of whatever she wants if she sings a song. In this book, she is, in the very beginning, kind of treated badly by this gross guy. He makes a few sex pest type moves towards her, and she obviously doesn't speak, because if she spoke, it would have an effect on everyone around her. All the people that she works with in this hotel that she works at think that she's mute. And so when given the chance, she lures away this gross guy by singing WAP, or is it WAP or WAP? I think it's WAP. it sets the mood. It's a lot of moments like that. There's a lot of pop culture references and moments that I feel like were a choice. See, Lou is supposed to be quite ancient, and I don't mind that she's up to date on pop culture and things like that, but a lot of it felt heavy-handed and didn't really make too much sense. She has a best friend that's a witch, so there are witches in this world as well, and then she is intercepted in an alley when she's trying to kill Sex Pest for his blood by a Reaper, which is another type of being in this world. They live in another realm. They show up and reap all of the paranormal creatures. They are kind of like the police for the paranormal creatures. Lou and this Reaper end up accidentally bonding and then have to go on this mission together to figure out a mystery. It was fine. It wasn't terrible. I think I ended up giving it like a 2.5. It was just not great, and it felt like an early work from an author that I was going to eventually like. Is how we'll put it. And that's exactly what it was. I will not be continuing on with this series, even though the first book kind of ends with a cliffhanger-y moment so that you'll continue on, but I'm not interested. It wasn't funny enough to keep me engaged. It was fine. It was disappointingly fine. Everything was just kind of like fine for a while. The next book we're going to talk about is very, very different from that, and that is The Exorcist by William Peter Blatty. I also read this in a vlog, same vlog as Misery. Well, this is the story of our two main characters, one being a priest and one being an actress, but we are following both of their points of view when the actress's young daughter, I believe she's 11 or 12, her name is Reagan, starts exhibiting very disturbing and awful behavioral and physical symptoms that something is going on with her. And we then are following these two characters, the mother who's an atheist who believes that her daughter has been possessed by a devil after she's taken her to every single doctor and nothing has worked. There is some sort of demonic force at work in her opinion. And then we have the priest who believes that there is some sort of mental or physical ailment, disability, disorder happening to Reagan, and he is much slower to come around to the thought that this might be something supernatural, otherworldly. The titular exorcist is a character that only shows up in the prologue and at the very end of the book. This is interesting. If you haven't seen the movie The Exorcist, again, what are you doing? What are you even doing? How are you even existing? Go watch it right now. It used to be considered the scariest movie ever. Just like I think this book was probably considered extremely scary. I think that with the amount of horror media that I have ingested, it gets a little bit harder to scare me, but I will say this is incredibly disturbing because of the things that are happening to Reagan, and we are getting that point of view from the adults that surround her. I will say, this book is incredibly dialogue heavy. There's a lot of, this is mostly dialogue, very fast moving dialogue, sometimes really somber, sad, depressing moments, hard stories to read, other times sarcastic, funny moments. William Peter Blatty is really good at writing dialogue. I enjoyed this. I think I might have enjoyed it more because I had read the movie and I knew where this was going, but I read it. I read The Exorcist. The next book I picked up after that was The Harvest Bride, and this is by Kati Wilde. This is in the Deadlands series, which for some reason I have read one, I think it's Midwinter Bride I have read, and then I've read a bunch of novellas, but I have not read any of the other full-length books in the series. I don't know what my problem is. This is a series of fantasy romance novels in this fantasy world that our author has created. There's magic, there's good guys and bad guys. In this novella, we have Sarya, and she lives in a small town, and she has a secret history. Before she showed up in this small town, she has a past, but now she lives in this small town, and she has this neighbor who shows up randomly because he is a traveling warrior mercenary type that you meet in one of the other novels. His name is Bannon, and she calls him Bannon the Blowhard because he just doesn't stop talking. She sees him as kind of like a gnat, like an annoying presence that shows up from time to time, and he shows up and he just kind of like openly flirts with her. Like, it's very, very obvious that he is very into her, and she just kind of is like, he's here again, talking, telling her stories. Bannon the Blowhard. Bannon, through circumstances, ends up finding out about Sarya's past, and these two end up having to work together due to something that is endangering the small town they're in. Feelings start. There's a little reluctance on our female main character's side to even let the feelings happen because of previous things that have happened in her past. It's a short novel. It's a fantasy romance. She's not a wilting flower, and he likes that about her. It reminded me of that scene from Game of Thrones, where, what was the wildling's name? The guy with the red hair, where he's just like enamored with Brianna of Tarth. Like how he is just, that it felt like that. If you liked that dynamic, he's not small and she's not huge, but she's also not small. He's kind of described as a big burly guy with red hair, and she is described as a very like muscular fit woman. So it was giving off those vibes where it's just like he's looking at her with hearts in his eyes and making suggestions, and she's like, are you okay? What is wrong with this guy? So if you've always wanted to read Brianna of Tarth adjacent stories, I think this novella would work for you. I need to go back and read some of the more of the books in this because I've liked everything I've read in this world that this author has created. And the last book we are going to talk about is The Unhoneymooners by christinalauren. This is my first christinalauren book. This was a one I feel like that was making the rounds a while ago. When did this come out? Whenever this came out, I feel like it was super duper popular. I saw it everywhere. The cover gives the epitome of summer romance. I wanted something summer romance, so I picked this up. And it was completely mid. The farther I've gotten away from it, the more I've forgotten. It's very forgettable. If this is your favorite book, I'm sorry. I'm happy for you. I'm happy that this is your favorite book. Let me tell you what this is about. This is the story of Olive and her twin sister Amy is getting married, and Amy is kind of a control freak. Olive is there trying her best to keep her sister in good spirits on her wedding day. The biggest downside is that the best man and Olive do not get along. The best man is the groom's brother. His name is Ethan. These two are absolute enemies. They can't stand each other, but they've got to make it through this wedding because the two people they love, their siblings, are getting married. When food poisoning hits the reception, and Ethan and Olive were the only two people that didn't eat the accursed seafood platters. So there is a non-refundable honeymoon to a tropical resort that the bride and groom are just going to lose out anyways. They're too sick to go, and it's just going to be gone if no one takes it. And because Olive looks exactly like her sister and can use her ID, she ends up going on the honeymoon with the groom's brother, who's the only other person who could possibly go because he has the same last name as the groom, and also he didn't die of shellfish poisoning. I mean, not that anybody died, but they kind of wished they could die because it sounds like everybody was just really, really sick. These two have to pretend they're married to go on this tropical vacation. They have plans to stay far away from each other, but obviously circumstances keep making them have to keep pretending that they're in this happy relationship, and then feelings start happening. I think this book seriously suffered from the lack of Ethan's point of view because he just comes across as a jerk. And because we're only getting Olive's point of view, who wasn't my favorite, I didn't hate her, I didn't love her, but you're only ever getting her point of view and you're not getting any insight into how Ethan is seeing things. And I think that's why this book really kind of suffered for me in my reading experience, because it felt like the change from him hating her to liking her was kind of on the sudden side, but it probably wasn't if we had gotten more of what was going on with him, how he was viewing these different events that were happening between them. I also felt like there was a lot of unnecessary fights in this. Olive is very immature in a lot of the instances, and she's not supposed to be like an 18-year-old. She's an adult, and she's making really immature choices in a lot of situations. Also, the gravel was just fine. Everything was just fine. Like, it just felt fine. Which apparently is a bad word for me now. When I say things are fine, apparently that's not great. Thankfully, my reading started to turn around not too far after this, although I do still feel like I'm getting a lot of mid books. But that, kids, is where we're going to stop this recent reads. That's enough books to talk about for now. And the dogs are both passed out. Winnie is still passed out on the air conditioning vent, just hoping it'll turn on any second and cool her down. If you had fun hanging out with me and the dogs, please subscribe. I hope you're reading good books out there, wherever you are, and I'd love to hear about them. And I'll see you next time.